All right. So I know we're going to have some people joining us, but we're going to get started. If you want to keep saying hello in the chat and connecting with each other, fantastic. Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Beglia. I am the Alumni and Development Program Specialist for Excelsior. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a fireside chat with Douglas Perry. Perry is an Excelsior alumnus, second VP of the Alumni Leadership Council, and our January 2025 Mentor in Residence. This is a program that we do every January in honor of National Mentoring Month. So it's a month-long, fun program. So we did mentoring minutes last week. If you didn't see those, they are on social media where Doug gave a bunch of tips throughout the week. We're doing our event tonight. We've got some inquiring minds meetings that we've got filled up already, but I encourage everyone to reach out to me personally. I'll put my email in the chat later on if you want to be on the waiting list for those meetings. And Doug will talk about that later too. And then, of course, at the end of the month, he's going to do a week-long takeover of our Excelsior Connects networking platform. So I'll put some links in the chat. We'll chit-chat there, but we'll get into it. So tonight, Douglas is going to be sharing how you can weave diverse experiences in work and education into a meaningful and wonderful career. So he'll share a little bit about his own journey, and then we'll move into a Q&A. And that's where I encourage all of you to start sharing your questions with us. So since it's a fireside chat and it's a little bit more low-key and a little bit more informal than our typical webinar, yes, you can put your questions in the chat and in the Q&A throughout. I want you, when you have a question, to feel comfortable to put them in there. So we'll take 15 to 20 minutes at the end to actually address those questions and chat with you. But again, please feel comfortable to put those questions in the Q&A in the chat throughout. So I invite you to get cozy and warm, maybe grab a cup of tea. I'm going to pass it over to Doug.
All right. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. There's some advantages to being of older age. And one of those advantages is experience, not because it gives you a whole bunch of extra knowledge necessarily, but it gives you perspective. It really allows you to look back in your life and to see what worked and what didn't work. It allows you to reflect on your journey, on where you've been and how you got there. In a way that just can't happen when you're 30 years old or 25 years old, just because you're still heading out in one direction, not looking back in the other direction. So if you will allow an old man to talk a little bit about things from that perspective, think of this as mentoring. Mentoring is not a case of instructing and telling, it's so much as it is a case of guiding. And that's the way I hope that you will receive what I want to share with you this evening. Some guidance based on experience and based on a long perspective on about careers and what happens. And a lot of it is based on what happened to me. And that's what gave me the idea to give this as the subject for this fireside chat. So the title of this is Building a Coherent Career from Multiple and Different Experiences in Education and Work. I'm really focusing this on people that nobody's starting out from scratch. Nobody is that young where they're really saying everything is going to be in the future. We all at this point have some kind of a past. And yet we're changing gears, we're changing careers, we've discovered new things, we want to go in a new direction, or we don't know what direction we need to go in or want to go in. And we have this kind of a jumble in our lives. We've done a little bit of this, we've done a little bit of that. Some things worked out, some things didn't work out. And you kind of, you sit there and you look at what you've done over maybe the last 5 or 10 years, and you say, well, gee, this isn't really, all that I want to be. And so I'm going to have to start over. I'm going to have to go back to college, or I'm going to have to finish this and start over again. And gosh, I wish I had thought of this when I was 18 years old, and it's too bad that I'm 32 years old now. Don't feel that way, because it's never a case of starting over. It's always a case of continuing your journey in life and your career journey. You don't have to forget the past. You can build on the past. And that's what I hope to convince you of with this chat tonight. If we could have the next slide. So really, career paths are rarely linear. I've probably known, honestly, in my life, maybe 2 or 3 people that seemed to have it all figured out when they were in high school and said, I want to do this. And then they took the next steps to do something. and then they wound up being something. That's very, very rare that that happens. And it's not a case of being lost or of failure or not being able to get it together. It's the natural process of discovery. It's the natural process of growth. I mean, think I've got a grandson who's a year and a half old, and he's, he learned how to walk, and I watched him walk, and forgive the baby steps analogy, but I mean, he was stumbling and falling and bumping into things, but it wasn't a problem. He was moving ahead. He was acquiring the experience that he needed to learn how to walk. And that's really what our lives are like, and all the things that happen to us and by us in our lives. So career paths are rarely linear. They can include lateral moves, changes in direction, continuous adaptation to new challenges and opportunities and challenge. Rarely do we discover what's in ourselves that we love. We think we know what it is, and we feel that for a while and say, "This is who I am. This is what I want to be. This is what gives me joy." But as I'm sure you've probably all have discovered, that changes. You discover new things about yourself that you didn't know that you realize you want to do, or something that gave satisfaction initially eventually kind of wears out, not for a bad reason, but because you've kind of you've played out that mine. You've dug all of the gems that you can out of it, and something inside of you is telling you that you need to adjust and move on to something else. Next slide, please. So the first thing we're going to talk about in the introduction is that most careers are built as you go. They're not planned out. And what I'm trying to say is this is the normal. This isn't a compensation or an adaptation to failure. This is the normal route that most of us take. Next slide. And a career is a journey. A career refers to the journey of professional growth and development an individual undertakes throughout their working life, not just when they're beginning or not just when they're making some kind of a career change, but throughout their entire life. And a lot of these things are going to sound sort of like, well, yeah, I know that. And sure, of course. But I want you to kind of revisit and rethink these ideas and these points that are going to be made in the upcoming slides from the perspective of where you've been and from the perspective of your past, and using these things, reaching back into your past to put together a future. So we have various roles and responsibilities and achievements over the years. You've got individual jobs, there are learning experiences, and overall progression across multiple sectors. But this happens all the time, all throughout your career. Next slide. And professional pathway, a career is a long-term pursuit of a developing ambition or the general course of progression towards emerging goals. Now, there are two operative words, or maybe three, that I want you to focus on here. First of all, it's long-term. It's always long-term. Even when you don't think it's long-term, it's going to be long-term because the decisions and actions that you take years past are going to influence where you're going in years future. Think of a sailboat going on a lake in the wind. The wind is going to push that sailboat in a certain direction, and there's only a certain amount of freedom that you have based on the direction of the wind and the force of the wind. But you've got this sail, you've got this rudder, and you can work with the wind to carve out a path. That wind is sort of the modes of fate and the consequences of decisions and actions that we've made in the past. But we still have a sail and we still have a rudder to use that wind at our backs to move towards the future. So that's always going to be long term, even if it doesn't feel like it's long term at the moment, that pursuit that you're going to be making. And then the second operative word I want you to focus on is developing, of a developing ambition. You're not going to have it all automatically. You're not going to suddenly discover, this is very rare, where you will suddenly discover, oh my God, I'm so in love with this idea, with this thing of, some discovery that you've made that is absolutely transformative, and you become a new you, and you suddenly go off in a whole brand new direction. It's going to be gradual. You're going to have a little bit of experience with something. It might be something that you don't think you don't even like. And then you have a little more of experience with it and you realize that you might have a taste for it. So it's something that develops. It's not just a simple decision which is made. Gee, think of the high school counselor. Well, what do you want to be? Well, I think I want to be this. And so you make a decision and you follow a course of action from that. That's not the way it works in real life, certainly not over the course of one's career. And then the third operative to focus on there is towards emerging goals. These are not goals that you then, that you set and you say, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, or I'm going to be that. And then suddenly you take the steps and you go over there. It's something that develops and emerges. The goals start to appear, goals that you never thought you'd have, goals that you never dreamed of, goals that even if you had been told about them by some transcendental future voice, you would listen to and you say, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't sound like me. These are things that are going to emerge as you emerge, as you grow, as you develop. So here's the important thing too. It's not just about the jobs you take. And so much when we think of a resume, or a portfolio or a curriculum vitae, whatever you want to call it, we think about jobs. Well, I did this and I did that and then I did this. It's so much more than that. It's also about the narrative that you create in your professional life. And I emphasize that word narrative. I'm not talking about spinning the facts of your life into something that sounds good. I'm not talking of certainly not talking, God forbid, I'm not talking about lying or, leaving out things and trying to pretend that you've had a life that you have not had, that you've had a history that you have not had. I'm not talking about any of that. The narrative comes from the things that are there. And you may not even be aware of how they are thread together into a narrative. I hope to give you some good examples with other people of the narratives that they've had in their lives. And you'll be able to see how when they started out with something like a job at a McDonald's, and you say, well, how the heck do I put that in my narrative? What's that got to do with me wanting to be an engineer or something like that? But it does matter. And so the narrative that you create is you honestly and sincerely identifying those things in your life that mattered in your career, that led you to where you are, and that are guiding you to where you want to go. Next slide. Education and skill development as hallmarks of a career. A career typically involves continuous learning and skill enhancement. And of course, I think, we all know this, but it's kind of different when you experience it. So it's not about, I'll say it here, it's not about getting a degree. And I think anybody would tell you that was, it seemed like, oh, I've just got to finish this. And when I get that degree, I'm done and I'm happy. And now I'm going to be a happy, fulfilled person. And I know what I'm going to do and everything's going to be fine. And all the problems I've had are done. And that, of course, will not be the case. You'll always be learning, even if you're not in college, even if you're not taking some kind of formal training or something like that. And also you're going to be learning and acquiring skills, whether you intend to or not. In fact, I'll go so far as to say whether you want to or not. Things will happen to you that will empower you, that will gift you with some new capacity and some new skill, even if you don't want to have that skill, even if it was some unpleasant experience that forced you to acquire that skill as some kind of adaptation, for example. Well, suddenly you've got a new skill that you can then use, and that then can become part of that narrative, that honest, truthful, and sincere narrative that you are threading together for the continuation of your journey, and that narrative that you can share with others that are going to help you along in that journey. So this can include formal education, such as college degrees, of course, and certifications, as well as informal learning experiences like workshops, online courses, and on-the-job training. OJT, on-the-job training, is huge. And I think it often gets overlooked because it may not be formally called that. And so you say, well, I'm just doing this job and these were the responsibilities that I had in the job. But when you think of it as training, and if you if you document that, even if it's nothing more than a little, should we say a diary entry? Well, this week I was working on this. Now suddenly you've got something that is part of that whole learning and education experience that you can honestly, formally incorporate into that narrative of your education. Next slide, Mackenzie. Roles and responsibilities is a hallmark of as hallmarks of a career. Throughout one's career, an individual may take on various roles and responsibilities. These roles can range from entry-level positions to leadership roles, of course, and these roles can be both incremental and or additive. Well, the point I want to emphasize here for the purpose of our chat tonight is those entry level positions, which may seem like something not even worth mentioning in a resume or as part of your career story, could actually be extremely important. But they are extremely important, but then it might take you some sort of reflection to be able to realize their importance and to uh, uh, explicate or explain or document that importance. And the roles can be incremental or additive. You could keep the same job. You could even keep the same job description. You could even keep the same, job activities, and yet those roles are going to be changing. Even if it's only incrementally, you'll see that things evolve over time. And if you are aware of that and put that as part of your narrative, that can be additive as well, or that can be helpful as well. Okay, next slide. Professional achievements. Achievements and milestones mark significant progress in a career. This is, of course, very obvious, and this is usually the thing that everybody thinks about. I got this award, I got this promotion. This was a huge event that happened. And of course, it's mentioned here because, of course, those are extremely important, and that is something that you need to keep in mind, and maybe they should even stay as milestones. But the point here is that these are not the only things that happen, and yet these tend to be the things that are mentioned in somebody's resume, for example. There might be three or four big things that happen that they include. When there's an entire story of little things that were incrementally additive or incrementally building upon, that could be ultimately just as important as some big milestone could be. Next slide. Career satisfaction and fulfillment. A fulfilling career aligns with personal values, interests, and goals. But here's the point that I really hope that you'll appreciate. These can and will change over one's lifetime. They are never static. And you might know yourself very well. You might think you know yourself very well. And it turns out there's some part of you that something happens to you in life and you discover a new part of yourself. And that changes your goals. That changes what you want to be. That changes what you realize you can become. So they are never static. And what fulfills you in your career at one point in your career may not be fulfilling at another part of your career. And that's normal. I have met many students over the years. I've been a professor many years and I've had hundreds of students. And I've met many students who told me, once they graduated, I had a lot of graduate students, for example, for years and where I was. And they said, well, when I got my undergraduate degree, I thought I was going to be doing this. And gee, I graduated and I went in that field. And it really wasn't, I discovered it really wasn't what I wanted to be. The problem there is not that somehow they made a terrible mistake and they've wasted time and money and everything else. It really isn't. That was part of the discovery that they needed to go through to discover some new emergence of what they wanted to be. They said, no, what I really like is this, or now this is where I want to go. And it was never a waste of time. It was never a loss of time. It was a step in that gradual ladder that they were climbing. Next slide. Adaptability and evolution. A modern career often involves adapting to changing industry trends and technologies. And of course, this goes without saying, this is especially true in this day and age. Certainly in terms of technology and the skills that are associated with that technology. the kinds of skills that are valued today didn't even exist 10 years ago, and they might become passé or commonplace 10 years from now. This is going to be a something that has to be expected, and that makes sense in terms of having an ongoing developing career journey. So again, it's not something static that you get and you keep and you use, and that's all there is to it, like a box of tools. It's more like a library where you're constantly going to the shelves and picking out a new book. And these changes and trends usually cannot be foreseen and they must be adapted to. So again, don't think in terms of, when you run up in something in your career, don't think in terms of, oh gosh, I didn't prepare for this, or I didn't make the right decisions, or gee, I wish I had taken that course doing this. No, because there's always going to be something new that you're going to bump up against that's going to challenge you and evoke a new direction in you, a new capacity, a new need to acquire a new skill or function. Next slide. Moving on to career construction. The idea here is building upon, not discarding past education and work experiences. Next slide. So building a bridge from past to the future. Recognize the value of past experiences. This might sound trite. This might sound like, oh, sure, of course, but believe me, it's amazing how, again, the conversations I've had, how people can overlook things that they've done because they say, oh, well, heck, that was, I mean, anybody could do that. Or, that's when I was, that was 10 years ago. And that's, what's that got to do with me now? And they tend to discount those things that have happened. They tend to minimize them. They might even be embarrassed about them. They said, oh, geez, I was doing this back then, and I don't want to tell anybody I was doing this. And that's not the right way to approach this because every experience, whether positive or negative, contributes to personal and professional growth. And I can tell you in my own life where I've had plenty of negative experiences as well as plenty of positive experiences. Every single one of them contributed ultimately to my professional growth. Skills and lessons from past roles can be applied to future endeavors, and I hope to give you some very convincing examples of that towards the end of this chat. Next slide. Interdisciplinary skills and transferable knowledge. Skills learned in one field can be transferable to another. This may not be obvious. I've read about a student, in fact, an Excelsior University student who I do not know, but I read a little bit about her narrative. She was a rad tech and a radiographic technologist. And she liked her work and she liked it for a while, but she realized that it was a certain skill set and she had uh, acquired that skill set and had mastered it. And she had gone as far as she could with that skill set. Well, she realized that she liked the whole thing that had to do with radiation and radiation physics, which of course is a big part. Ionizing radiation is a big part of radiologic technology, understanding the physics of that. And she liked that idea of it. She learned a lot of skills and knowledge about radiation physics and about the handling of radioactive materials. And especially, she learned about radiation safety. So she continued in that direction, took extra courses, extra training, and she became a radiation safety officer for a large medical center. A very responsible position, as you can imagine. And so she built on the skills that she had in a field that was actually technically far away. That was in the allied health side of things, the patient care and the diagnostic side of things. It wasn't with the work safety, the occupational safety for an institution and that side of things. And then interdisciplinary knowledge fosters innovation and problem solving. So the things that you've learned and the things that you've done and the knowledge that you've gained, don't think of them as a mere mishmash of this and that. As you lurched from one idea to another, as you moved ahead in some way, and then you discarded and moved on in some other way. as being disconnected. Don't think of those things as being disconnected. There is a connection, and you are that connection. And your life and your path is what connects all of those things together. But again, people are not going to recognize that unless you recognize it and are able to tell that story, to share that narrative. Next slide. Build resilience and adaptability. Dealing with past challenges and failures can build resilience and adaptability. It's true, isn't it? We can have things happen to us that knock us down in terms of our careers, our jobs. We could get fired. Again, we could wind up in a situation we just discover that we hate the job and we thought we were going to love it. And what do we do next? And it just seems like a challenge or a failure, and that's all there is to it. You've got to put it behind you and get over it and forget about it. No, use it. Don't forget about it. Embrace it. Realize the value of it and incorporate it, the good things of it, the things you've learned and the things you've gained from those experiences, from those failures and challenges to build a new direction, a new bridge, a new pathway for your future. Overcoming obstacles prepares individuals for future uncertainties. Truth be told. Next slide. Creating a cohesive career narrative. And this might be one of the most important points that I hope to make with this fireside chat tonight. Weave past experiences into a compelling narrative for career progression. Again, folks, I'm not talking about, spinning your resume. I'm not talking about lying or hiding or, being ashamed of something or, trying to deny some past and wish it never happened. In fact, even if you're not inclined to do this, and most people aren't, you might think about this not as putting together, oh, okay, I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to put it down in a resume. If you do that, you're going to have a book. And of course, a resume can't be a book length, or a portfolio or something like that. A curriculum vitae, if you're in the academic world, those can be very, very long. My CV, I think, is something like 38 pages long. But otherwise, that's not going to be the case. But even if you're not inclined to do this, I do offer this as I think, a very helpful suggestion. Try journaling just to yourself. In other words, this narrative, weaving past experiences into a compelling narrative, write that compelling narrative. Write it for yourself. It doesn't matter if anybody else sees it. In fact, maybe it'd be far easier if nobody else sees it. You don't have to worry about how it sounds to other people. Just tell yourself your story. Tell yourself what you want to do, what you've done, and try to put that narrative together so that you understand your own narrative. Even if your resume is only going to be 2 or 3 pages long, or some posting on a website or something like that, you're going to be ready with the story, with your life story, with what you want to share when you go for interviews, when you're telling people about where you want to go, when you're networking, when you're at some kind of a trade show or a conference or some kind of gathering, and people ask you about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about, where you've been and where you want to go. You'll have the answer because you've taken the time to think about it and to write it out. It'll be extremely helpful. And in fact, you might think you know what you want to say. You might think you've got your narrative understood to yourself, but you haven't really taken the time to do it. And then when you're asked, okay, well, what's the most important thing that happened to you 5 years ago? And what do you want to be the most important thing that happens 5 years from now? You might be suddenly caught and say, well, 5 years ago I was unemployed. But if you've got that narrative together, you understand where you are. You understand who you are, and you can share that far easier. And believe me, people are going to pick up on that because that spontaneity and that depth of and sincerity that comes with that kind of spontaneity. They're going to realize that you really do know yourself and you know what you're talking about yourself. You're not just saying something that they want to hear because they'll pick up on that too, believe me. Okay, let's see. Career disconnections are often new chapters, and they can honestly and truthfully be presented that way because that's what they are, honestly and truthfully. They're new chapters. So I've met people and I've read CVs and applications and resumes where people have said, I got laid off in this industry and I had to seek a new direction. And this gave me the opportunity to take a step that I would not have taken if I still had had my comfortable, secure job. Suddenly that seems what seems like a disconnection or a drawback or some problem like like fixing a flat tire. Suddenly it becomes a door that's opening up. And that is the way it is conveyed to others. They'll see it as a door that opened up for you. A colorful career history can enhance personal branding and professional opportunities. The idea of having a here and there, here or there, and this, that, and the other um, resume. A lot of people, they're worried about that. They'll say, oh, gee, it looks like I jumped around and I didn't know what I was doing and I couldn't make up my mind about things. And, I'm not stable and I wasn't mature and I didn't have everything figured out and then moved in a direction. No, there is a color to that. There can be an exploratory nature that can be conveyed in the things that happen to you and the things that you decided to do and the new passions that you discovered and what happened therein. That can be part of the narrative as well. And again, if you journal this, if you write this out to yourself, I promise you, because I've done this, you will discover things about what happened to you that you didn't realize you felt. Or maybe now in retrospect, you look back on it and you say, by goodness, now I can see how that really worked out for me. And how it wasn't just something that was disjointed, how it really fit in with where I'm going next. Speaking of next slide. Practical steps for integrating past experiences. Well, of course, I think this is pretty obvious. Identify and articulate transferable skills. Keep in mind that they may not be skills that you think are even worth mentioning. They might be very common skills. They might be skills that may not seem to apply for where you want to go, but they'll fit in somehow, I guarantee you. So absolutely be able to identify and share what those skills are. And then update resume and professional profile to reflect a cohesive career journey. This is where that kind of journaling and reflection comes in because that's what you're going to be doing for yourself. You're going to be identifying a thread, an arc, a bridge from the past to the future. And once you've, for yourself, identified what that bridge is, then it becomes very easy to sincerely and spontaneously share that bridge with others. Next slide. Leveraging education. Here we go. This, I think, certainly applies tonight for most of us. Connecting past, present, and future education. Next slide. Reflect on past educational experiences. Understand and value the knowledge and skills gained from previous education. It doesn't matter if you're an English major, you were an English major, and then in your junior year, you decided to go into a technology field or something like that. It doesn't matter. There's still skills and things that you gained in there in those prior years of your education, which will be usable in your current education and future education. Highlight key experiences such as foundational courses, memorable projects, and influential teachers. Especially the influential teachers, that adds the personal part, especially if you can keep in touch with them, not only for recommendations, but for inspiration and putting the personal touch to your narrative, that the recognizing and explaining and telling about the influence that certain individuals have had upon you. Just today, I got a request for a recommendation from a graduate student of mine who I have not seen in years and years, and she's making a big jump. And she asked me to write a letter of recommendation from her based back when I was her thesis advisor. And I remember everything about her. Even though I hadn't seen her in years, the connection. Oh, yes, Romina, and da, da, it all came instantly back to me. The connections are there. You might not think, oh, gee, I haven't spoken to this professor or this high school teacher or whoever in 10 years. You'll be surprised. They'll remember you. If they were really that kind of influence in your life, that means you were some kind of influence in their life as well. Highlight key experiences such as foundational courses, memorable projects, influential teachers. Sorry, I just read that. Do it again. Identify and build on the strengths and interests developed during earlier education. Even again, if that educational direction has changed over the years, there's something to be gleaned from it. Next slide. Maximize current education. Emphasize active engagement in current coursework, internships, and extracurricular activities. Identify current resources such as up-to-date courses and career-appropriate curriculum, and use academic support services like tutoring, mentoring, and career counseling. We need not dwell too much on this. I'm sure you're all very familiar with all this, and this is what's going on currently in your careers. And so we don't need to spend a lot of time with this, but it's an important part of leveraging your education, so it should not be just overlooked. Next slide. Integrate your education with career goals. Align current education with future career aspirations through targeted course selection and skill development. And of course, one has to pay extreme attention to curricular requirements, what you need to get your degree, and that goes without question. But as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of leeway. And you can be creative with that leeway, not creative in the sense of taking shortcuts, but creative in the sense of exploring new avenues that will help towards degree requirements, but that will kind of expand your interest or who you are or the skill set that you have. And when possible, gain practical experience and build a professional network while completing current studies. This might seem difficult, especially for students. They're learning online. They have a job or a job and a half. They have a family. Then it's kind of hard to get out there and they don't have a lot of extra time. But I think you could be surprised at the level of networking you can do. I give a good example. There are all kinds of professional and trade organizations out there. And I don't care what your field is and what your interest is, there's going to be some kind of organization out there. And many of them love to have volunteers at some level. And it doesn't mean that you're physically showing up to some building and doing things there all the time. There's all kinds of things that you can volunteer for. For example, I belong to the Society for the Study of Evolution. I'm a cell biologist, and that's one of the societies I belong to. And there are a lot of college students that are involved with that organization. They do all kinds of work, of volunteer work with organizing online webinars, with voting for officers and heading committees and so forth. And it's wonderful because they get practical experience from that. And it's a wonderful networking opportunity for them, even though they haven't left their homes. They're already meeting people in the field and getting a feeling for what the professionals in the field are interested in and what they're talking about and the things that are important to those people. So that's a wonderful opportunity. It's a lot is possible out there. Next slide. Adapt to future educational trends and technologies. Explore emerging trends in education, such as online learning. Not so emerging anymore, is it? Interdisciplinary studies and new fields of study, and that's always emerging. It's really a challenge to see where fields are going and what's around the corner. And that's something that we all could pay attention to in terms of doing our research for future directions. Stay adaptable and open to learning new skills and technologies, of course. Embrace lifelong learning as a means to stay competitive and relevant. That sounds like a trite truism, doesn't it? But honestly, I've met so many students. I've known so many students who say, "When I'm done with this freaking degree, I am done. That's it. I'm not going to open another book. I'm done. I'm sick and tired of it, and I'm done." And of course, that won't last. That you cannot continue with your life if that's the attitude you're going to have. And most of them, they get over that. Once they've past that particular milestone, they're able to continue with that. Really, lifelong learning is it should be something that's of delight because you're going to be picking up things that you want to pick up. You're going to be learning about things that you're interested in. You're going to be embracing new ideas and causes and trends that you feel are important and that you want to be a part of and that you want to contribute to. Next slide. Maximizing work experience, turning the seeds of the past into the trees of the future. Next slide. So, reflecting on past experiences, again, this is a little bit repetitious of what I was saying earlier, but writing a journal, a memo to yourself, an entry to yourself where you're just, talking to yourself about who you are and where you've been. Reflecting on past experiences, identify skills and strengths developed from previous work experiences. That's not as obvious as you might think. You might think you did something that wasn't important or not valuable, but identify it and see what it was and then put it down there on paper and think about it. And you might realize that there's more to that value to that than you had realized at first glance. Learn from past experiences and failures to improve future performance. We've talked about that. Create a career portfolio of accomplishments and experiences. Again, if you do journal this and you write this all out, you've got your portfolio, even if the actual words and text that you're sharing in applications and so forth is just a fraction of that. You've got it all in your head, and even better, you've got it all in your heart. And that's what you're going to be able to give when you're talking with other people and moving ahead in your career. Next slide. Connecting past, present, and future. Create a cohesive narrative that connects past experiences with their current roles and future ambitions. It doesn't matter how hodgepodge, how different those experiences were, even if they seem totally unconnected. There's a thread there, and the thread is you. And all you have to do is look back and see what that thread is and find it and identify it and talk about it. Next slide. Careers, the stories we live, my own career path and other examples. And we'll start with other examples. Hopefully this ties it all together and gives you some convincing evidence of the points that I've tried to make this evening. Next slide. Okay, so here we have the tale of a fast food worker who went from a fast food worker to a hospital administrator. Started as a cashier at a fast food restaurant, excelled in customer service and managing rush hour chaos. But hey, they were working in a fast food restaurant. That's all they were doing, right? Let's tie it together. Took evening classes in business administration while working, recognizing the importance of efficient systems and empathetic leadership. Empathetic, where did that come from? It came from the experience that he had with customers, understanding their frustrations, understanding why they feel bad about a mixed order, or why they didn't like the price that they were charged or something like that. Trying to get into their hearts and their shoes and emphasizing with them, not treating them as enemies or people to be rebuffed or ignored or whatever. So that person gained a little bit of empathy and realized, okay, there's such a thing as empathetic leadership. I can deal with that. I can understand. People can be difficult, and there are problems that deal with that. It's not a case of bossing people around or ordering them or denying them or ignoring them. And so already that person was off to a good start just from this fast food job that they had. Secured an administrative support position at a healthcare clinic, developed, but just administrative support. We're not talking about some high-level job here at all. Developed a passion for improving patient experiences and healthcare delivery. Where did that come from? Well, if you start at the very beginning, what they liked about the job, what they excelled in, so that means they probably liked it. It wasn't flipping the burgers. It wasn't running the cash register or taking orders. They didn't necessarily like that per se. But what they really liked was the whole idea of process, of serving customers, of take there's have this all this chaos and rush hour stuff that's going on, and oh my God, what do we do? And feeling that they were able to negotiate that, to manage that rapid river, and get through it. And they had some feeling for process. They had a feeling for customers and people, of delivering something, of giving something, of making something happen over a length of time, even under stressful conditions, even when the people receiving these benefits, as it were not necessarily that receptive or appreciative of what was going on. So it kind of makes sense now. Improving patient experiences instead of customer experiences in the fast food joint. Now they understand about patients and the frustrations that they have and the fears that they have and the difficulty in communication and people listening to them that they might have, and in healthcare delivery, the problems that are involved with resources and managing personnel and physical resources, capital resources, to make something happen for the benefit of patients. That talent, that gift, that skill began back when they were flipping burgers at McDonald's. And so they advanced to managerial roles. They implemented innovative scheduling systems and staff training programs, leading to significant operational improvements. And then, because of all this, as the years went by and all of this happened, the person was recruited as an operations manager by a major hospital network and now serves as a hospital administrator, leading initiatives to enhance patient care services. Now, think about this story here. Should that person have forgotten or hidden that they worked, at a McDonald's or something? Should that be something that they leave off their resume? Or, God forbid, something that they don't include in their own personal narrative of their journey? Hell no. That's the beginning of their journey. That was like where the bridge began. And that's a very important part. That was like the foundation, one of those foundation stones of the bridge. And it is valuable and worthy to be included in that narrative. It wasn't, a false start or just taking time to figure out what they wanted to do. Not by any means. Next slide. Next story. Next life story. From gas station attendant to automotive mechanics instructor. Worked at a gas station, assisted customers with minor vehicle issues. It was a low-level scut job, folks. Let's call it what it was. They were probably minimum wage and odd hours and everything else. Probably this person was in high school when they started doing this sort of thing. Not a whole lot to brag about, right? But self-studied automotive repair manuals during downtime. Now, why did they do that? Well, they discovered when they were around these cars, even if they weren't doing anything with them, that they like cars and they liked the idea. They were excited. Something about cars excited them, and they enjoy being around cars. They liked the whole thing of automobiles and how did they work and that sort of stuff. So they made a discovery about themselves that allowed a new door to open up. And this person, they didn't do a whole lot at first, right? Self-studied automotive repair manuals during downtime. Maybe there's something on the shelf and picks it down, flips it, it's sitting there killing some time, and he flips through the book and the manuals and says, oh, so this is how a carburetor works, or this is what a fuel injector is. And they realized, gee, I kind of like that. This is kind of interesting to me. They made a discovery. But they did it through their job. That low-level, lousy scut job that they started life out with, that's where it began. And so eventually they enrolled in an automotive technology program at a technical school. And they excelled in classes and earned certifications, including hybrid vehicle technology. That whole idea of looking to the future, it doesn't mean it's a future you necessarily want to have happen, but if you see it coming around the corner, you can kind of prepare for it and work towards it. Gained hands-on experience as a mechanic in reputable auto shops. Pursued teaching certification to address the shortage of skilled technicians and began teaching evening courses at a community college. One thing was leading to another. And they developed innovative curricula integrating emerging automotive technologies. And then now this person, who was just a gas station attendant with no education and no future, supposedly, and now is a full-time instructor and the head of the automotive technology department. I just realized the clock. I got to move on. Let's move real quick here. Let's go to the next slide. From freelance artist to UX UI designer. UX is user experience, user interface design. I'll be real fast with this one. Freelance artists creating illustrations and graphic designs for local businesses and personal commissions. I actually knew somebody who did this in New York, and she wasn't making a whole lot of money out of it. She had fun doing it, but it was not steady work, believe me. And this person sought greater stability and impact and became intrigued by the whole UX UI design idea through the intersection of art and technology. She was fundamentally an artist, but she was not averse to technology and enrolled in online courses for UX UI design principles, and especially in human computer interaction, responsive design, built a portfolio by redesigning websites and apps for better user engagement, even though, again, that's relatively low level work at the beginning. You're kind of just fixing things and making a web page here and there. But her artistic background provided an edge in creating visually appealing and intuitive interfaces. Hired by a tech startup as a junior UX UI designer, honed those skills, led design teams on large scale projects, currently a senior UX UI designer at a major tech company, and creates user-centric designs reaching millions of users worldwide. Just think if she had tried to ignore her past and didn't build upon it. You can see it was a bridge that was being built, even though she herself couldn't see it step to step. It was a bridge being built. Okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to talk about myself real quick in the couple minutes that I have. Next slide. My own career pathway. Let's see if I can do this in a way that makes sense in just a couple of minutes. I'll start out when I was in high school. I had a friend whose father had emphysema and was in the hospital, and we visited him, his father. And every now and then, this person would come in and with this machine and would have his father breathe on this machine. And I was, a 16-year-old kid, and I saw this person doing. He was helping him breathe and giving him breathing treatments. And I thought, oh, gee, that sounds like something that might be fun and useful that I'd like to do when I, get out of high school. That it's in a hospital and it's helping people and doing good things. I thought, oh boy, this is great. I'll do that. Well, I did enroll when I graduated from high school in California. I enrolled in a junior college out there, which everybody does in California. That's the California thing. And I got an associate degree in respiratory therapy. Well, lo and behold, now this was back in 1972, a long time ago, friends, and it might be hard to visualize this because respiratory therapy and all the allied health fields are so far advanced. It was a brand new field back in those days. And hardly anybody had any formal training in respiratory therapy. Most of them were on the job trainees. So to actually have a real associate degree and to be able to become a registered respiratory therapist back then was a big deal, even though I didn't have a whole lot of education. And a college in New Mexico was starting a new program in respiratory therapy. New programs were in respiratory therapy were starting all over the country. It was a brand new field back then, and there were jobs to be had and everything else. And so I was actually able to get a job in New Mexico teaching respiratory therapy with an associate degree because I was the registered therapist. I was the only I was the second registered respiratory therapist in the entire state of New Mexico at the time. So I hope that makes this what sounds preposterous an actually believable case. That really was the case. But lo and behold, here I was with an associate degree in Albuquerque in the 1970s. Forget computers, forget online education, forget any of the possibilities that are everywhere available now. There was one university, University of New Mexico. They wouldn't take my associate degree. What was I going to do? I called up one of my instructors back out in California, told him my situation. He said, "Have you heard of back then it was called the Regents External Degree Program of the University of the State of New York? They have some kind of a way of getting a college degree that you might be interested in." I did everything by mail. I wrote to them. They wrote back to me. I made a couple of phone calls. Forget computers, forget online education. One thing led to another. I got a bachelor's degree in liberal arts with an area of concentration in biology. So now I had teaching experience at a small college in Albuquerque. I had an associate degree in respiratory therapy. I was a registered respiratory therapist, and now I had a bona fide bachelor's degree in biology that could be used. I was able to get a job teaching respiratory therapy at the State University of New York at Stony Brook. Now, of course, they call it Stony Brook University. And at the same time, I was able to continue my graduate education there and get a master's degree in health sciences. I did the research route. Well, guess what my thesis was in? It was in respiratory physiology. I did research with that with a couple of the physicians in the medical school, pulmonologists that were more than happy to take me on as a research graduate student for some projects. Got a couple papers out of that. With that, I was able to then I had good grades and I was able to get a fellowship, quit my job. I got a fellowship to study full time to get a doctoral degree, a PhD in biomedical sciences from back then it was called Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York City. It's now called Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And I got a PhD in biomedical sciences with a specialty in cell biology. Well, now at this point, I had all of this respiratory background. I had a master's degree. I had a doctoral degree, and I even picked up another one along the way, which I don't have time to explain. And I was able, because of that, to get a position, a tenure track position as assistant professor at the Indiana University School of Medicine. They had within that School of Medicine a School of Allied Health Sciences. I was able to teach there in pulmonary physiology, cardiac physiology, pathophysiology, but most important, I was able to do research in the Division of Pulmonary Medicine, and I specialized in, guess what, lung cell biology. Well, one thing led to another. I got grants. My research was successful enough. I got, a lot of publications. I eventually wound up being a tenured professor in the School of Medicine at Indiana University. This was a guy who, as a high school kid, wanted to be this respiratory therapist because it looked like be something cool to do. One thing led to another. I didn't know it was going to go that way. But one step led to another, and nothing in the past was not usable and valuable for the future. I've run out of time. I won't talk about the second half of my career, which was in academic administration, which probably would bore you to tears anyway. So at this point, I am going to stop. I was supposed to have stopped a long time ago, folks. I'm sorry to blab on and on and on, but I hope it's been of value to you, and I hope we have some time for some questions, Mackenzie.
Yeah, let's give a few extra minutes for questions, just because we let folks know, if you have questions. So we'll give a couple of extra minutes. We'll probably go around to 8:05, 8:06. I do see in the Q&A already, we've got one. Doug, how does one get a fellowship?
Well, of course, there are many different kinds of fellowships. I will tell you that to get a fellowship for doctoral study in the sciences is relatively easy. And I don't mean easy in terms of, something like that. They're available. And the reason why they're available is because most graduate programs in science, they're funded. They're federally funded for the research that they do. And part of those federal funds pays to have graduate students. And so graduate students get a stipend that allows them to stay alive while they're earning their degree. Fellowships also exist in the humanities, but they're far rarer only because the humanities are not funded in the same ways that the sciences are. And that's to give a very, very, very short answer to that question. There's a whole lot more to that answer, of course.
Thanks so much. I do not see any other questions in the Q&A, but again, we'll go until, around 8:05, 8:06, and we'll just chit chat. If anyone has any questions, we'll, put them in there. Oh, okay. We've got one. Have you ever heard of Marquis Who's Who organization? Is it worth it to be selected to be in? Is this a kind of fellowship?
Okay, well, in a word, no, I have not heard of Marquis per se. I have heard of Who's Who. That used to be something that was very popular in years past before the days of social media, before the days of LinkedIn, for example. and people would essentially pay to have their professional profile published in a who's who. I don't know if that is the proper answer to your question because I'm not familiar with Marquee. But if it's that kind of who's who, I would tend to think it's probably not something to be interested in. Now, I could be completely wrong, not knowing the specifics of that organization, but that's my immediate off the cuff feeling.
They just wrote in the comment section, yes, it is.
Oh yeah, okay. I don't think that would be especially valuable. It wasn't even all that valuable in pre social media days. I would think it'd be even less valuable today. Not that I'm a super knowledgeable about all what's going on out there in the social media world by any means, but I do feel LinkedIn it can be, if people really use it, it can be very valuable for getting out there and achieving what you would hope to do with the old who's who.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Checking this Q&A again. I think those are all of our questions, but of
All
course, we'll leave
right.
it open for a couple more minutes.
Okay. Well, I
Okay, now
apologize
we
for
have,
talking longer than I should have, but
no, you're fine. You're all good. It was fantastic. And everyone is saying such wonderful things. If you want to take a second to look in the chat, all these wonderful
okay. I try
words of
not to look at the
affirmation.
chats because I find it distracting for me. But I
Gotcha.
just saw someone, was it Jacobo? Did I say that right? I don't see it now, so I don't see your name, but they said that they use LinkedIn tremendously. And it really can be very valuable. I know a lot of people, they'll put their name there. Yep, that's it. Thanks. And
Yes.
some people they'll start it and then they don't do anything with it. And of course, then it's not going to do anything back. But if you really use it and reach out and get out there, it can be very valuable.
Yeah. Big fan of LinkedIn. One more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I just have a couple of announcements, and I'll let Doug speak for a moment. This is his month to shine. So, our last question is, where can I go when I need encouragement on creating a narrative / am not able to find the threads to pull it together and am feeling discouraged about being able to convey how earlier non-impressive experiences gave me transferable skills?
Well, I would love to talk with you in our one-on-ones. And those are coming up. That's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. I know that they're all booked. But if you could put yourself on a waiting list there, hopefully we'll be able to talk. If not, maybe we could talk more. Something like that does require kind of a one-on-one kind of answer, because I promise you, you don't need to be discouraged. The discouragement is just happening because you're starting it. And it's like, how do I do this and how do I pull it together? Believe me, once you get started, it'll work. But that is something that be very helpful to talk with somebody else about. So hopefully I might be the person you'll be able to talk with that about on a one-on-one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. So I've put a few links in the chat and they're kind of all sporadically spread out in there. So the first one is for Excelsior Connects. Like I said earlier, Doug is going to be doing an official takeover of Excelsior Connects. So he's going to be posting different things every day the last week of January on there. So please, if you're not on there already, please register. It's open to all members of the Excelsior community. I'm on there. We have a lot of the ALC members on there, staff, faculty, you name it, we're all there. So he'll be there and he'll be posting. And of course, this is a great way to connect with Doug as he's also signed up for Excelsior Connects. The other thing that I put in there is this is our month for nominations for the Alumni Leadership Council and for our Alumni Awards. So those are open until January 31st at close of day. So please, if you are interested in applying for an award, we have 3 awards that you can officially apply for. Or if you're interested in being on the Alumni Leadership Council, like Doug, we encourage you to use the link. I put it up in there to apply for that. And we will be reviewing those applications in February and March and doing some interviews for the Alumni Leadership Council. So once you submit an application, if you're interested, you'll receive some additional information on that. The other thing that I put in there is my email and the ALC email. So my email is mwright@excelsior.edu. If you would like to be on that waiting list for those Inquiring Minds one-on-one Zoom networking meetings, those are on 128 and 130, both 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email me and I'll put you on the waiting list and I'll reach out to you and I'll let you know. And hopefully we'll be able to get you in there with Doug. If not, You can email me some questions that you may have for him, and I'll forward them along. You can also email alc@excelsior.edu, which is our special email for all of the ALC members. We like to forward things along and have people connect with them there. So that's also a really great spot to connect with Doug. Anything else, Doug, that you want to share tonight?
Not that I can think of the moment, except, you've got your whole lives ahead of you. You are on that journey. And don't be discouraged. Sit down and look at what you've done. It's far more than you might think off the cuff, really.
Thank you so much. And I just saw one last thing. Someone that had applied and had not heard from us yet. Yes, we will be looking at those applications once they all close at the end of the month, and you'll hear from us as we go through the process. But I promise you will hear from Excelsior. We will get back to you. All right. Thank you so much. We love this month, National Mentoring Month. We love being able to celebrate it with Doug. We love that you were able to participate in it. Thank you again, Doug. A wonderful presentation, and thank you to all that were with us tonight. Have a great night.